We had already grown over 2,000 pounds in fresh vegetables and gathered over 1,200 eggs from our 4 hens after 2 seasons of gardening. We had hundreds of canned vegetables and freezers full of frozen ones. Utilizing the same square footage, we made some big changes to the garden that winter that would set us up to grow even more food from our small city backyard. You can notice many of the comments were positive and reminded them of a time when backyard gardens in that neighborhood were more common. They often ask, "What do you have growing now?" Or, "Do you grow any of this vegetable?" If we did grow what they ask about, we made it a point to share some of the harvest with them. Let me be clear, a family of 5 could not consume all of this alone. What an amazing feeling it is to be able to give food away. What we couldn't eat went to the compost or our chickens who loved fresh vegetables as well.
That winter, we removed the greenhouse, a painful decision for us. However, the area that the greenhouse had previously occupied now served to grow more produce for us. We built a lot of raised beds. Most were made from cedar that we cut out of dog-eared fence pickets. Some were made from scraps of an old privacy fence. Most measured 4 feet by 6 feet and were 12 inches tall. This is where things got a little expensive, because now we had to fill all of these boxes. And we learned quickly that not all garden soils were the same. Looking back, this was the most expensive part of our ever-evolving garden. We built other structures as well that year, like a lattice trellis that would be used for our Malabar spinach. We made framing to hang buckets from and do upside-down cherry tomatoes. They look cool, but keeping them watered was a challenge, and after that season, we never hung buckets again. We had one very tall raised bed that we grew root vegetables in. Again, we made another mistake by using horse manure to build the soil level and save on the cost of garden soil. The manure was full of seeds, which later sprouted in the garden and caused a lot of unnecessary work for a raised bed. We laid a heavy-duty nursery weed barrier between the rows of boxes to help save time on mowing and pulling weeds from the garden that year also. The aesthetic features of the garden that year were pleasing. However, the production was not on par with the previous 2 growing seasons. Pest pressure and drought were troublesome. We were constantly watering and hunting bugs. Many beds were so infested we lost the crop before we could harvest anything. And then there were the groundhogs. So many groundhogs.
It felt like we had taken 1 step forward and 2 steps back. We still had plenty of produce that year, but it was just not the same as previous years. Some of the new vegetables we introduced were simply unappealing to our taste and thus became chicken fodder. We had attempted growing early season lettuce varieties and had never seen much success. So, after researching warmer season leafy greens, we decided to try Malabar spinach and New Zealand spinach. Both plants performed great and had very little pest pressure. However, the taste and texture were just not what we had hoped for. We grew mortgage lifter tomatoes that year. This was a winner. Although production per plant was lower than other varieties, the size, density, and taste of these were the ultimate summer tomato for sandwiches. We also introduced Arkansas Traveler tomatoes, which we found to be an amazing all-around variety. We used them in salads as well as canned them. The yield per plant was much higher than the mortgage lifters or purple Cherokees we had, but not quite as high as the Roma tomatoes we grew the last 2 years. We also tested dinosaur kale out. It performed amazingly and even held up through some of the early summer before bolting. This was our go to smoothie green from the garden and did not seem to attract as many pests as some of our other greens. We also grew an amazing bean known as yard long green beans. And true to its name, these beans grew up to 3 feet and had amazing flavor.
Our hens continued to produce faithfully for us as well, and there was no shortage of egg production that year. We were, however, consuming less eggs than the previous year, and we would leave dozens of eggs on our neighbors' doorsteps so as not to see them go to waste. We had seen success and failure that season. We had also spent a lot more time and money to keep up with the raised bed garden. In 2018, we scaled back on our garden, only keeping a few raised beds that year. Production was low, and other life events were taking more time. In 2019, we decided to take a whole new approach to the garden. Discovering the Back to Eden method, we decided to bring in wood chips and cover the entire garden area with them to create a food forest. I remember the first truckload of wood chips that came in. Matt had met a crew that was doing some tree work at the end of our road and told them they could dump the chips in the front yard. In 2017, we had built a privacy fence around the garden area, and the gates were not large enough for the truck to back through. So we had to haul this in one wheelbarrow at a time.
If the neighbors didn't already think we were crazy for having a backyard garden and chickens in the city, now they knew for sure. I believe we had 2 or 3 truckloads total of wood chips brought in. We spent a few days hauling into the garden and spreading it all out. I remember thinking, what have we just done? And why did I listen to her on this one? But as time would tell, this was the absolute best thing we had ever done for the garden. We began to plant again a little later than usual in 2018. However, the plants took off and loved having the wood chips as cover. We did not plan out the garden that year, but instead planted pretty randomly. There might be a few tomato plants over here and more all the way across the garden. There might be a bean trellis on this side and bush beans on the other side. We had completely changed our approach to gardening, and it was amazing to see it working. We often have 2 months of little rain in the heat of the summer. However, we never had to water the garden that year. The wood chips held the moisture in the ground. We planted red amaranth as well that year, interested to see what it tastes like. Well, we never had the chance because every bug in the garden was on it, but they stayed on those plants and nothing else. We said, eat as much as you like. And the beneficial bugs were happy with this setup as well because now they knew exactly where their next meals were hanging out at.
2018 was a shorter growing season for us, yet it was also a highly productive one, and although we did not keep track of the numbers, we grew plenty to can, freeze, eat, and share with others that year. We also discovered that the Back to Eden method was way cheaper than any other form of gardening we had done. Since around this area there are no shortage of tree companies, there would never be a shortage of new wood chips when we needed them either. The look and feel of the backyard food forest garden was amazing as well, and we would often just go sit and enjoy the relaxing beauty of it all and listen to the bees' hard work as they buzzed happily through the sage blooms.